Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Today, I wanted to cover some of the real mysteries on the Waltons. So stay tuned for that. If you enjoy these segments, please do hit like and subscribe. So this episode is sort of about all those questions I get about why did they do this and why did they do that? And that was weird. What was that about? So I thought I'd address some of these. Some I might have answers for. Probably most of them I have no idea. Something like the episode The Changeling. I get asked about that. And a lot of people say, I don't watch that episode. It does seem a little strange that the Waltons would do an episode that was really kind of about a poltergeist. Whether you believe spirits exist, don't exist, take the shape, can move things around or not, still seemed a little far-fetched for the Waltons. So valid question. And it was around Halloween time, and there probably were other movies out around that time or other shows focusing on spooky things. So perhaps they were getting pressure from the network to do something that fell in line with that. I think the same thing could potentially be said for the one with the Ouija board. That was a little less far out, perhaps, than things moving around, but it still was a little bit dealing with the spirit world, which I think a lot of us do. You know, we certainly feel the presence of people we've loved and lost and stuff like that. So, I thought it was a kind of sweet story with the little boy whose mother who'd passed away was trying to keep him safe. So I thought that one made sense. But I know people have said, why would the Waltons be dealing with a Ouija board? And why would Mama and Grandma let them? Well, again, I don't have a good answer to it. These are in no particular order. For instance, why did John Boy's car paint color change? And originally in the episode, the car, it was that like really dark blue. I don't know what it looked like on your TV, but it was a very dark blue. And then John Boy was talking about how he wanted to change it to sort of a tan color, a beige color, which is sort of what it ended up being. Now, I did get, someone sent me a message, a comment saying that they seem to have some knowledge of what happened there, that the car that they were originally working with, they discovered there were some serious mechanical issues with it or something like that, and it was going to be a real problem going forward. So they were trying to source another car to use, and the only one they could find was this tan color. So they explained it by having John Boy say he wanted a dignified tan color. So whether that is true or not, I don't know. We certainly dealt with a lot of mechanical issues with the cars that we use, so maybe they were trying to get ahead of the game on that one. One of the most commonly asked questions is, what happened to Virginia and Charlie and Mary Ellen's kid? Well, John Curtis, basically, in the reunion movies. And I have talked about this. There was never anything said about how Virginia died, how Ginny died. I've heard speculation, but I don't recall ever specifically hearing anything or seeing anything in a script. Charlie, he just kind of went poof. So we have no idea about that. John Curtis, I just always assumed he was off in college, or at one point I said something about he was spending the holidays with his girlfriend. But it certainly, there could have been a mention of him. I agree. And as many of us have said, we did question it, and we were told, don't cause trouble, no one will notice. And we said, they will notice. And of course, you noticed. Big question. You have 11 people in a family. Why is the bathroom upstairs? Did that house come with plumbing originally? And if you were going to plumb a house, why would you go to the trouble of running the plumbing all the way up to the second floor? Why not put it on the ground floor? But, what do I know? Hey, and maybe it was built that way in the first place. But you think about it, when Grandma and Grandpa had the downstairs bedroom, it was a lot more for them, and especially Grandma, once she had her stroke, to have to climb those stairs to use a bathroom, kind of tough. Which raises the second question of why was that entrance to the grandparents' bedroom only the one that was off the landing, when we did see in the episode The Theft, Grandma come out of the bedroom from that door right by the front door in the living room. So particularly after she had her stroke, seems like it would have made a lot more sense for her to use that door. So I think sometimes it was done mostly because that's what everybody did, and that's what everybody was used to. We'd never really established, aside from that one episode, anyone come out of that or into that as access to their bedroom. And if that door opened and we saw in there, we would have had to see set dressing. We would have had to have it lit, things like that. So that was a bit of a practical thing. But from a standpoint of story-wise and characters, not practical at all. How about this one? Has this crossed your mind? I know it has with some. Did John Boy ever actually graduate from Boatwright? We never saw a graduation ceremony. He was still in college when he talked about wanting to go to New York, and all of a sudden he was in New York. So we could perhaps assume that between season 5 and season 6 that he had completed college and had a graduation that we simply didn't see. But, at that point, we weren't going to go back and create a graduation for him because he was gone. A number of items or animals that were seen briefly and then never seen again. Olivia's bicycle in the episode The Bicycle. She had that bicycle. She rode it all over the place. We never saw it again. I can see perhaps Olivia not riding it around a lot, but certainly any of the other Walton children could have ridden that bicycle, but we just never saw it again, did we? A bicycle's pretty easy to tuck away in a garage. A printing press, on the other hand, is not so easy to hide. And never mind how they got it into the shed, then how did they get it back out of the shed? They probably had to take out the whole front or side of the shed and put it back together. But hey, you have a family that does building. So pretty simple then, but man, that thing, according to John Dayton, I believe it, he said that thing was really, really heavy. So quite a bit of work for a team, but they probably had lovely equipment that they could use to move it around. So, but yeah, we don't really know exactly what happened to that printing press. Then a whole series of animals. Blue. Of course, we met Blue early on in season 2, I believe. I believe he was given to John Boy in the episode when Sissy Spacek's character Sarah had her baby up in the cabin, and I think it belonged to the older lady that John Boy saw along the way up to the cabin, and she had that mule, and I believe she gifted it to him. And then he was around for a lot of seasons, and then we just sort of stopped seeing him around. So again, I guess he was just supposed to be in the barn or something, or out in a field, a meadow. We'd like to think of him out free grazing and stuff like that. Then there was Rover, the peacock. He was there for a while, and then he sort of wasn't there. So he was a little bit of he kind of appeared and stayed for kind of as long as he wanted to, and then perhaps he found a mate, a peahen, and started a family someplace other than in our front yard. Myrtle the goat was another one that sort of appeared and disappeared. We first saw Myrtle in The Wing Walker, and then, of course, that was when Maude Gormley actually gave us Myrtle, and then she would come visit Myrtle, and we would see Myrtle around, but we certainly didn't see Myrtle all the time when we were outside or seeing animals. So, most of those things are practical things, because any day one of those animals worked, it cost money. The trainer had to be there. Someone had to bring it. It was there all day. It had to be paid for. I'm sure, there was a fee for using those animals. So if the company didn't need to have an animal there, they didn't just kind of have it hanging around. The chickens were about the only things that kind of hung around. So extra animals, they needed to be in the storyline. Jeffrey had a dog, Nick, that we met in The Traveling Man. I guess that one made a little bit of sense because Jeffrey and Serene, of course, left to go back to live with their father at the end of season 8. And The Traveling Man was episode 21. So if we didn't kind of see Nick around, then I guess it made a little more sense. We could assume he was still someplace, and that he went with Jeffrey when Jeffrey left. Elizabeth's pony, the Baldwin sisters gifted her with a pony in The Ordeal that we see Amy riding around on. But then Elizabeth, I think, finally maybe rides it a little bit, but it sort of disappeared. So did she give it back to the Baldwins? Was it another one that was out in the field with Blue? I don't know. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm forgetting some things. You all know these episodes so well. So as always, I do expect you to correct me if I am not correctly remembering something. If there's some episode where something was explained or we saw these animals again, do let me know. In the episode, The Beginning in season 9, Miss Emily is gifted with the dog Dickie. And then we don't really see Dickie again, particularly. So all of a sudden they have a dog that just, we don't see it every time we're at the Baldwins. So I guess they had a special bedroom or something, or room or space for sweet little Dickie. And then Corbeth, this one was really confusing to me. In The Fledgling, when Corbeth and Ike come to deliver something to John Boy at the room that he is staying at in town, she has a puppy, Clementine. They're going to the movies. I never understood. Is she taking this dog to the movies with them? Is she leaving the dog in the car while they go to the movies? What's the deal? And did we ever see Clementine again? No. So perhaps with Corbeth, it's possible she went, a puppy is just too much trouble. So maybe it had a little pen in the outside someplace where it would not be causing any sort of damage to anything that Corbeth would disapprove of. This one I know you've asked about. In the episode The Tailspin, Jim Bob fails his eye test, which is why he can't go train to be a pilot. He gets glasses. We never again see him wear those glasses, do we? I don't remember seeing him wear them. Do you? So I guess his eyes magically got better. I don't know. Anybody got an explanation? This question is sort of one of mine. When we first meet Jonesy in The Whirlwind, he talks about being a geologist and that he, in the war, was learning to blow things up. And now he wants to protect the earth. He wants to, do things that are helping the earth. And so at that point, he's a geologist. When he came back in the reunion movie for A Day of Thanks for Waltons Mountain, or on Waltons Mountain, he was now a veterinarian. So I don't know, maybe he, went back to school and studied to be a veterinarian. Maybe at that point in time in the late 1940s, maybe didn't take as much training to be a vet, or maybe he was a vet tech and wasn't actually doing surgeries or things like that. But seemed like quite a career change there for Jonesy. So caught my attention. One of the biggest questions, which I did talk about just recently, why did they bring Kurt back from the dead? Biggest mystery probably of the Waltons, and one that I don't have an answer to. Anybody got an answer for that one? I don't know. I just considered that it was because they wanted to put some sort of obstacle in the way of Mary Ellen easily marrying Jonesy. And I guess to some degree, I'm grateful there was a big enough obstacle that meant I got to stay on the mountain, because otherwise I would have been married and off traveling with Jonesy, which would have meant, once again, I was out of the house and not involved in anything. But I think they could have potentially come up with another obstacle, maybe something in his life, maybe something that meant he needed to stay. So who knows? But I think it was perhaps a misguided choice in terms of a storyline. Shall we say that, to be kind about it? Olivia's family. We heard a lot about John's family. We met a lot of John's family. We met a handful of Olivia's family. Her uncle Cody, cousin Olivia was, sort of a goddaughter of hers. So there were points, Uncle, beyond that. And she made mention of a sister, Frances. We met her Aunt Kate, and she talked about having a couple of brothers in when they renewed their wedding vows. She talked about, she would want to potentially invite her brothers. But she never really talked about her parents. The only time we heard about her parents really was predominantly in the homecoming, when Olivia tells the children how her parents were against her marrying John because they didn't exactly approve of him because they thought he was kind of a little wild, maybe, and the fact that he didn't go to church every Sunday concerned them. But yeah, it seemed odd, and I don't know why that was. I never thought to ask Earl about it because it never really crossed my mind until some of you started saying, "What about Olivia's family?" It's a really good question. Anybody wondered why in the Walton kitchen, some of the upper cabinets have little drawers in them? So they're quite up high and they have drawers. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Is there somebody who knows about building houses or, older houses? Would there be a reason why there would be drawers on some of the upper cabinets? I mean, you'd need to be very tall or get up on the countertop or have some sort of a step ladder to get up there to actually get whatever's in those drawers. So it seems kind of impractical. My sense was that when they were building that kitchen, they just had upper cabinets in stock, and they just in their stocks of materials in the studio, and they just said, "Oh, here, put these up," and thought, once again, nobody will notice. But once again, somebody noticed and asked, and I went, "Oh yeah, that is weird." So does anybody have an explanation for why something like that might actually occur? I'd be very interested. And then the ongoing question about how did the Baldwin sisters not know that the recipe was alcohol? Did they know? Did they kind of pretend to not know? What exactly do you think about that recipe question? This is far from a complete list of the sort of why did they do this? How come that? But I just thought I'd have some fun with some of the mysteries on the Waltons. So I hope you enjoyed this. And I will see you next time for more behind the scenes of the Waltons and more Ask Judy. Thanks for watching.